Plan for change, not perfection. In a virtual environment or a remote work environment, it's so essential for you to actually allow for change to happen in your daily or weekly schedule. It's very easy to just fill up your day or your week with a series of back-to-back hour-long meetings that are completely virtual because there's no transition time. You're not driving across the city to go meet somebody, and so there's really no downtime, and it's easy to get lost in a virtual meeting environment. What might happen after 3 or 4 or 5 different meetings in a virtual environment is you just end up being brain dead because you've had no downtime like you usually do when you transition from one meeting to another. Additionally, I would say in a virtual environment, it's just more conducive to multitasking. You might have multiple screens up. You could have your phone and you're tweeting and slacking and text messaging and sending out emails while you're in a virtual meeting. And no one will really know what you're doing because most of the time you're just staring at a little box of a face of somebody in a remote working environment. So the way you're going to plan for change is actually by managing your calendar differently. And I wanted to share with you a way you could think about managing your calendar completely differently. Some of you are going to say, well, I can't do that with my calendar, and I encourage you to just DM me and get some one-on-one coaching on that because every situation's a little bit unique and we need to look at your calendar to figure that out. But if you want to give it a shot yourself, here's how I think about my week's calendar, and I think it'll be really helpful for you to think about it this way too. I have 4 categories of meetings that I'm looking at when I look at my week. I have how many recurring meetings I have, those that come week after week after week because you're on some committee. I look at how many unique meetings that I have, and these are the ones that I intentionally reached out or I've been trying to schedule for a bit of time, and these are just kind of the one-off meetings that you often need to have. I look at what are the movable meetings, which are the non-essentials, but it's probably a good idea for me to have those meetings, but they're just not essential. And then I always look at, do I have some open space for other people to calendar over the course of the week in case they need me? So once you have those categories in place, the first thing to think about is just the amount of time you want to spend in each of those categories over the course of a week. The easy way to think about this is roughly 20% is equal to a day. 5 days, 20% is 1 day a week. An ideal situation, the way I would organize my week would be to have roughly 20% recurring meetings. So if you think about that being 1 day, do you really need to have more than a full day's worth of recurring meetings? Assuming that your meetings are 1 hour long, do you need to have more than 8 recurring meetings a week? And that's a question that you have to ask yourself. The unique meetings, I try to incorporate about 30%, and these are meetings that I'm scheduling for personal networking or a client meeting or interviews that I'm doing, and I leave about 30% of the week for these types of meetings, or about a day and a half, or another way to think about it is about 12 hours a week for these types of meetings. Then I leave about 10% of my time or half a day for movable meetings, and these are the types of meetings that can be postponed to next week, or it's not as important. They fill some space, but really I don't want to spend more than half a day a week in those kinds of meetings, or about 4 hours. So it just depends on what kinds of meetings these might be, but some of these are often movable. And then finally, I leave about 10% for just open time, which is about 4 hours where people can book, or I can, a new meeting comes up and I definitely have space for another meeting throughout the week. So what does that leave me with? Well, that leaves me with about half a day or 30% of a week. And that's just completely open space where I could actually work on stuff, start new projects. It gives me the flexibility to adjust for change. You know that game where you have to slide little pieces and there's one slot where it's open? It's kind of like that when you're trying to figure out this puzzle of your schedule. You kind of need open space so that you can move stuff around. It's when you don't have any open space that you actually are locked in. And so while it seems efficient to like kind of fill all the spaces in your calendar, it's actually more efficient for you to have blank spaces in your calendar so that if things change, you can adjust it as needed. Another tip I have for remote work is thinking about planning differently. The way I approach it is I actually start with a Google Doc and start sharing that Google Doc with multiple people in an asynchronous environment. And we actually start collaborating on the work remotely, asynchronously. So there are some objectives that are created and an overview, and then we all collaborate in the document asynchronously, and then we schedule a meeting. And in that meeting, it's really a share out of how we were thinking about what we wrote in the document, and then from there, processing the document together, analyzing it, and coming up with next steps. It's kind of the reverse of how you might approach it in a face-to-face environment, because what happens in a face-to-face environment is people might get together, go over kind of the plans and have discussion, and then someone agrees to take that and create a plan, and that plan gets created independently, and then you come back into a meeting and then you share the plan, and then everybody reviews and gives feedback. So you could see how this approach is almost the inverted version of that. The cool thing about remote work and approaching projects this way is that it allows you to work in shorter sprints, and that's what I recommend in this book, A Plan for Change, Not Perfection. It's really about working in shorter sprints, getting new data, testing it out, validating some assumptions, and doing that in short 2 to 3, 4 week windows of time. This approach to collaboration is just much more effective because it allows you to be agile in a world where information is traveling really fast. People aren't always on the same page, and these sprints allow for faster sharing of information, increased brainstorming, the inclusion of diverse ideas, and it reduces bias in decision making. So I hope you get a chance to try planning for change, not perfection, in your remote work environment. This is Anthony Kim, and like I always say, don't compare your insides with other people's outsides. Peace.